Even though Aston Martin had a dream start to the 2023 season, Lawrence Stroll isn't happy with how things are currently developing in the team. There are some things that are still not fitting his perfect narrative, and although his son not being better than Alonso is one of them, there seems to be something of a bigger nature to bother the billionaire. After his statement, one couldn't help but wonder, could Aston Martin become more competitive and win races in the near future? The Silverstone-based squad has notched immense progress in their pace and competitiveness compared to the 2022 season, one in which they were constantly laughed at. However, new facilities and the experience of Alonso brought the team where it is right now, as the Spaniard was able to finish on the podium in all 3 races so far. Even this seems to be not enough for Lawrence Stroll, who's very eager to see the first win of the season and has been constantly asking questions as to when he can expect this narrative to happen. Mike Crack has announced that the team will bring some developments to the following events, such as Baku, Imola, Montreal and Silverstone, and even though the home track won't be the last one in which the AMR 23 will receive upgrades, it will definitely mark a period in which the car will start to receive more and more recognisable form. Keep in mind that Aston Martin has one sole goal in front of them: winning a race and potentially challenging Red Bull in the later stages of this season, or in the beginning of the next one, as the difference with the Austrian team isn't that high, according to Alonso. But Aston Martin must remain realistic and understand one thing: Mercedes is also a team that has improved compared to where they started, and in Australia, the Silver Arrows presented a pace that was unmatchable for Alonso or Stroll. True, it was a front-ended track, and this shouldn't be the likely scenario in the following period, but yet again, the goal for Aston Martin is clear, and the boss wants to see this happening sooner rather than later. The team's principal spoke about the wishes of his boss, and even though he praised Stroll Sr. for always being straightforward, he continued, "The mission is very clear. Stroll has not been having any delay in telling us, when are we going to win the next one?" Obviously, he's happy we've made a step, but this isn't enough for his ambitions. The good thing with Lawrence is you know where you stand. He wants more, and we will have to deliver more. However, being ambitious is one thing, but actually having the power and the facilities in your hands to complete such an ambition is another. Keep in mind that Aston Martin is currently the next closest thing to Red Bull after hiring more than 50 engineers and their former chief aerodynamicist Dan Fallows to lead the 2023 campaign in the right direction. From finishing P7 in 2022 to having a strong potential to fight for P2 in the Constructors' Championship is a step that not many teams have been able to complete in the past. However, this isn't enough for Stroll. Can we blame him for believing that his team is capable of beating Red Bull? Definitely not. Unlike Mercedes and Ferrari, the approach that Aston Martin has is definitely the right one to enter a potentially monotonous and boring season that would be dominated by Red Bull only. If you admit that the RB19 is too powerful and there's no way that you can beat them in the remainder of the season, then the mindset and the entire energy of the team is dropping to the ground faster than you can imagine. But yet again, you don't want to be flying with your head in the clouds, and you always want to keep a cool head, and we must praise the way that Aston Martin tries to close the gap to the Austrian team. For starters, they're following their pattern to bring small but significant upgrades to every racing weekend, or at least many of them, something that Red Bull did back in 2022. This is something that's been confirmed by Mike Crack, who went on to add that the next couple of races are where we're going to see an improvement in the car's pace. On the other hand, the performance director of the team, Tom McCulloch, said that it will be very difficult to match the straight-line speed of the RB19, especially when the DRS flap opens behind Verstappen and Perez backs. When talking about this and where the goal of the Silverstone-based squad currently lies, Tom said, "I can't stress the cost gap thing enough. It's very easy to sit and say, I'll make 7 or 8 different rear wings to be globally optimized for qualifying with DRS and racing, but to do that is quite difficult when you're in a cost cap environment. Our aim is to develop the hell out of this car and get as close as we can to them, Red Bull, but they're not going to stay still. They have a good margin, especially over one lap with how fast their car is." Imagine telling this to Lawrence Stroll and imagine what his response would be. The last thing that this prospective billionaire would want to hear is that there's no way of beating a team that has done everything that's within its power to try and steal as much intellectual property as they possibly can. Obviously, the battle doesn't stop here, and even if Aston Martin isn't able to challenge Red Bull further down the road, it doesn't necessarily mean that they've done a bad job over the course of the 2023 season. Quite the contrary. But with only 3 races being run and done in the 2023 campaign, Mike Krack feels like it's way too early to draw conclusions on the AMR23's form. After all, Alonso was able to hold the Mercedes cars behind him in the first 2 venues and struggled to even get in a DRS zone with Hamilton, which goes to show that volatile situations like this are doomed to happen more frequently than the team would originally anticipate. Although Australia was a track that suited Mercedes much more than the previous 2, that automatically means that the Aston Martin cars would have had their fair share of struggles due to the front-end limitations of the track. It's definitely not something we should get used to. According to Mike Krack, the team was encouraged by the strong form that was shown across the first 3 tracks on the schedule, insisting that small margins will make a crucial difference as the calendar goes by. This is starting to shape into something that Lawrence would want to hear, and when Mike was asked whether being competitive over the course of the 3 tracks was something that lifted the spirits in the team, he said, "That's definitely true. 3 circuits with 3 different characteristics. To be competitive in all 3 obviously means we're as confident as we can be at other circuits. The range of circuits is very different. We have Baku with huge straights, and then you have Monaco with no straights. So all these kinds of things, it will always shift the field left and right. There's also something when I say we need to wait a couple of races. You cannot say after 1 race you are here or there. You need more data samples to really understand where you are." And it seems like Aston Martin has put an eye to the track they are planning to win in the near future, as the tight streets of Monaco seem like ones that the AMR23 wouldn't have too big of an issue conquering. Of course, if they manage to qualify here, it practically means that if they do a proper pit stop, nothing much can be lost. Unlike Ferrari last year, as Krack believes that his boss's wish would be fulfilled on the legendary track. One of the reasons why Aston Martin hopes they can come out victorious at this track is the fact that the car is missing a lot of straight line speed, something that would likely be addressed in the following racing weekends, but also because here it doesn't really matter who's the fastest, but who is the smartest. Luckily for them, they have the old fox called Alonso driving the car, so brain is definitely something the team can brag about bringing to the race weekend where all hell breaks loose. With this in mind, Lawrence Stroll will have a lot to say to his drivers as they head into every racing weekend so far, and we hope that the talk will be mostly encouraging and will keep their spirits at a high level. And for what it's worth, we do hope that Aston Martin and Mercedes will start to win races more frequently, because the last thing that the sport needs right now is another 2014 to 2020 period with Verstappen and Hamilton switching roles. What do you think about Lawrence's statements? Do you think that Aston Martin can win a race sooner rather than later? Let us know in the comments below.